So think about those things from the AdCom's perspective. The other thing to consider is really around the number of rounds that they have and the round that you want to apply to, because there's a lot of open seats, obviously, in round one or in early decision rounds, and less so in other rounds. So oftentimes people say like, hey, I've got a profile that everybody else has, whether that's in a banking background, a consulting background, technology, or an engineering background. There's a lot of people that have the same background. But at the end of the day, tons of people from those backgrounds end up getting into the class, and you have the best chance the earlier the better, because all the seats are open and they know they're going to place a lot of engineers, they're going to place a lot of former consultants. So have that thinking that the earlier that you apply, the more open the class open seats are. And then think really around the class profile, again, from like diversity, from like a gender perspective, time, because that's really important. And then making sure that your story is memorable, right? And then making sure that that story is also memorable to that specific school is even more important. So what I mean by that is you really got to connect three things. And I think applicants do two things really well. And that's typically they know their career goals. That's why you're applying for an MBA to begin with. And then they also, talk about the why. So that's kind of like the unique factors of why they want to do the MBA right now and why they desire to do it. The thing that's sometimes missing, though, especially when you only have 2 to 3 months left, is where you want to do it, because some people are really specific on that, and that's great. That makes it memorable for a specific school. But some people are very open to that. Like they say, I want to go to a top 5 school, or I want to go to a top 10 school. And then when they do their essays and they think about how to write their essays, it's not unique to the school anymore. It's just, I want to get into a top 10 school. And when we talk about sweat equity, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But those are some things to consider as we kind of kick off the call. And let's move on to the next question.
Right. Hey guys, hello everyone. I know majority of you are going to take part in the next Hunger Games, the next Squid Games. Few of you will move ahead in the interview rounds. Few of you will be eliminated. All the best, everyone. I'm Shantanu. So talking about the next point in the agenda, what aspects of your applications will demand most of your attention? So what we have done over here for you, like Tiger and I kind of split it into multiple parts. So first point is, the steps which are going to take you really very long, like longer duration steps which are out of your control. For instance, you got to work on the LORs, right? Not you, but your referees, right? So you've got to get in touch with your referees in time, and you actually got to also help them understand, what kind of questions they have to answer, which is extremely very important, because I have seen in the past, this happened at least with a couple of the applicants where their referees in the end, said that I really can't write a LOR for you because I was not aware of the questions, right? Also, you got to refresh their memory in terms of, hey, you remember I did that, that project. So yeah, I mean, these kind of things which you should really focus on. Apart from this, you have like school recruiting events, you got school visits, there are information interviews. Also, the events which schools organize, that is extremely very important because it really gives the visibility of your profile to AdComs. And I don't know if you guys noticed last year, but this is also going to happen this year. But schools like Darren, Fuqua, right? There are other schools as well. They waived off your application fee just seeing that you attended a couple of, I guess, two to three sessions. And so this really gives you visibility. Coming to the next point, longer duration, which is in your control, definitely asset development, right? your resume and the GMAT prep, right? So under asset development, I think what you got to do is you got to figure out your narrative. You got to figure out what story comes over here, and what's the best way I can portray myself. Eventually, it's going to be a trade between you and the business school, right? Business school needs something, you need something, business school wants something, you want something out of business school, right? So that needs to be reflected in your application, and the majority of that actually can be reflected through essays. On the other hand, resume is again a very, very important piece. People struggle with writing a one-pager resume, right? It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter, how much success you've had in your career. If the prime ministers can have a one-pager resume, so can you, right? The last part on this point is GMAT prep. Obviously, it's a huge blocker. I wrote GMAT twice. So yeah, I mean, these points are in your control, and would be great if you can, just take off GMAT quickly out of the way, so like you can start focusing on the application, which compromise like 85% of your entire chances. Yeah, that would be it. Tiger, over to you for the last point.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit about the shorter duration, like the more tactical and organization. So oftentimes, like applicants, I'm sure everybody on this call is doing really incredible things, both in your personal life as well as your professional life. But it's always tough when it comes to deadlines, right? Like when you're looking at, you're 2 to 3 months out, even if you're 6 months out, you have to stay organized with the end in mind, right? So all schools have a little bit of a different deadline for the different rounds, and so organizing, and I think one of the most important things is having an accountability person, especially if you're somebody that likes to procrastinate. That is something that we're all prone to. We've all been students in the past, so. Just organize a schedule, like get it down on paper or get it down in Excel, like get it down in some kind of system that's good for you to track and to basically check off. One of the last points I want to write on here, and this is from experience from both friends and people that I've worked with on the application process, is we all procrastinate. And we forget that there's technical difficulty sometimes when submitting. And that might not be to your internet connection, but it might be to the school servers, right? When everybody, especially in round 2, when everybody's trying to submit, and then people are trying to submit with 5 minutes left in the deadline. I've heard some horror stories. Some people have reached out to the schools and gotten it through the rounds, but that's like the last thing that you want to have as a stressor, is the last day of the deadline of round 2 or round 1, and you've completed everything over the last couple of months and you just can't submit because of technical reasons. So it's important to do it, look into the technical aspects, a week before, think about, how you can submit. And if there's some troubleshooting, make sure to do it at least 2 to 3 days before. There really isn't much that you should be doing 2 to 3 days before on your applications. It should be pretty tight by then. But we all procrastinate, so just things to think about in terms of the tactical.
Indeed, Tiger, that was a really very, very good point over here. When I was submitting my application, I was also like submitting at the last moment, and couldn't really get the portal to load, and that was a nightmare. But luckily, I could submit. Yeah. Right. Coming to the next point, how to select the best fit geography in the B schools for your profile, and what are your chances in those schools, right? So the first point over here, start with the post-MBA goals in mind, both the long-term and the short-term goals, right? I mean, so guys, I strongly believe that the goals really give a direction to the entire application. It really gives a direction in terms of where do you want to apply. For example, if you really want to get into tech, then go to West Coast, right? If you really want to get into finance, right? So you actually got to go, London in Europe, or New York, right? So I mean, post-MBA goals really matter a lot, right? Now, considering personal life fit, right? I had an applicant like, last year, and she was like, I would really want to go, to a warm weather. I just, I somehow feel that, uh, in general, in my life, it gives me enough strength, to perform, right? But also apart from that, I would say, a lot of times you would see that, the personal fit also comes with the kind of the companies, which Tiger is going to touch upon, in the next point. um, so yeah, Tiger, over to you.
Yeah, I think on the um, uh, location alignment, keep going back one more slide. Yeah. So in terms of the location alignment, like I'll just give you kind of personal examples. So I went to Cornell. It's about 5 to 6 hours from New York City, north of New York City. And if you're looking at when you apply, especially, like, where are your target companies, right? Like when you write about what you want to do post MBA, think about those target companies, and then think about the practicality. So, at Cornell, you're about 5 to 6 hours from New York City, and 30% roughly of the people want to get into financial services and mostly investment banking. That recruiting path is very labor intensive. You have to go into the city every single week to meet with alumni and other for like company events and just to network, right? That's how that recruiting process works for investment banking. And so you got to consider, taking the bus down 5 to 6 hours every single week, or carpooling down with people. And so really thinking about the target alignment is really important. I think, to Shantanu's point, if you want to work in tech, I think it's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years because tech has become so prevalent. If you just look at the demographics of where people are placing, but if you're at Cornell, it's really hard to get over to the West Coast. And if you look at the placement, it's a lot lower than schools like Berkeley or Stanford, or like the top 5 schools, right? Like if you're at Harvard or Wharton, it's a little bit different because of how big the alumni network is. So think about those alignment goals with your future career, as well as what you need to do in school, especially for recruiting. And then in terms of the unique fit, right? So the more you hone down on target companies, the location, the alumni, those things that you can like contextualize in your essays, the more color and the more you're going to help the AdCom visualize you being able to contribute at the school and being successful at the school. Because remember, these schools are very much thinking around the end statistics as well, right? They've got a 95, 99 placement rate of people 6 months out of school, 3 months out of school. So they need to place you. So remember that at the end of the day, they need to meet their stats still, right? Really only 1 to 5% of people can't be placed in 3 to 6 months. So most of the people will need to be placed. So really think about that from the AdCom perspective when you craft your essays and like your future career goals. All right, so what should you do now to show that you are, the best fit, well prepared, and highly motivated candidate for B schools? All right, so let's talk on sweat equity, because this is, as Shatanu mentioned, longer duration, but totally in your control. And so this is something, 2 to 3 months out is, enough time to put in some sweat equity. But the earlier that you do this, the better. So if, you're an applicant right now that's saying, I'm not going to apply this fall, but I'm going to apply the fall of 2023 application cycle, even better. So you've got, a year and about 3 months to do your sweat equity. And what we mean by that is, oftentimes when people write down the essays, and I work with applicants and they say, I'm applying to Harvard, Wharton, and MIT. And then I say, okay, that's great. why do you want to go to those schools? And, they talk about, hey, I mean, these are the best schools. Everybody wants to go to them. That's very obvious. And from the AdCom perspective, that's very obvious as well. But then you dig a little bit lower and you say, hey, have you been to Boston? Have you been on campus at Harvard? And it's like, no, I've checked out the website. I know the program, I've looked on it on the website, and it's like, okay, great. So you haven't been to Boston, you haven't set foot on campus. Okay, have you gone to any of the information sessions that are virtual, even that the schools put on? Oh no, I'm going to do that. I haven't had a chance yet. Okay, so have you talked with alumni or current students? Have you reached out to the admissions ambassadors? No, I'm going to do that soon. Okay, you really got 3 months left, right? So I don't know how many applicants that are really good GMAT scores, really good GPAs, very awesome professional record, but they know nothing about the school besides what's on the website, and that it's a top school that everybody wants to go to, right? So it's really hard to differentiate yourselves, right? Like if you think about in the essays, oftentimes it talks about like the Stanford essay, right? What matters most to you? So you can talk about what matters most to you, but the best essays are ones that say what matters most to you, and then how the Stanford GSB is intertwined in that, right? And oftentimes it's through people. Like when you step on campus for an informational session or an event and you meet an alumni or a current student, I love those essays when people can connect the dots and they say, somebody that I met during an informational event, during my recruiting process at the school of learning about the school, really inspired me to think about the school and think about it in a different way. And it connects with my values. It connects with the values of the school. Those are much more powerful essays, because often when you bring up people that are admissions ambassadors or really active alumni, most admissions committees, they know the students that are really active in their communities. And when you bring up, students and your interactions with them, the AdCom gets really excited, especially for schools like Cornell or Dartmouth, because they're schools that are hard to get to, because they're out of nowhere in college towns. And so the more work that you do of getting to know the school, visiting the school, attending events, it actually really matters. One of the anecdotes that I like to say is, like one of my friends at Cornell, we went in the same year. He had a very low GPA, very low GMAT score, but he attended the most recruiting events of anybody that I know. And at the end of actually applying, he actually knew all the admissions committee members and interacted with them at different events. He visited the school twice, which is a really hard school to get to, right? This is 5 to 6 hours outside of New York City. And so that sweat equity that you put in is going to help you write better essays, but it's also probably going to get you your name in front of the admissions committee the more events that you go to and the more interactions you have with them. So just want to really passionate about this topic. So happy to answer any questions as you have them around this sweat equity concept.
Right. And I totally agree with the sweat equity. Even last season, we actually had an applicant, Tiger. I think the only reason that guy got through, like, I will not say only, but one of the biggest reasons that guy got through was because he just knew so much about the schools, and he applied with the GMAT waiver, and the school he got through was Kenneth Flagler. GMAT waiver, Kenneth Flagler, that's actually huge. And I really felt that sweat equity, the amount of time applicants spent in knowing the school, when he came up with the first draft of the essays, that was mind-blowing, really mind-blowing. He just knew school too much. It actually gave me goosebumps. I was like, why don't you write a book on different schools, right? So coming to the next point, knowing why you want to go to this target school, which is kind of following the sweat equity. Obviously, you got to research about the school. You need to understand the education style. You need to understand You know what? I mean, case method, every school teaches you with the case method, right? But still, it's a stark difference, right? Few schools would actually give you a case study first, and that's when they're going to teach you a lesson. Few schools are going to teach you a lesson. That's when you're going to get it. You are actually going to work on an assignment, which is going to be based on a case study. So it actually differs a lot, right? So do your research on these points, right? Um, Next thing is placement track record. I think, guys, this is extremely important for you as an individual, right? And this really also gives you confidence, you know, of how much inclined you are towards a particular school, right? And that inclination, just not the way it is reflected to an AdCom is not just by knowing, you know, the placement track record, but also by understanding the educational style, right? But the placement track record, the way it really plays a huge role over here is that it gives you internally the confidence, which you might not speak out in the interview or anywhere, but you know, that's something which is inside, right, inside you, and it's something which is within you, and it's extremely important. I saw a post on Reddit the other day. This guy made it to, I think, top 15, and already made it though, right? And then now considering that whether I should do an MBA or not, you know, it's a lot of money, and I really feel it's a huge risk. Though, you know, when the applicant was talking to the interviewer, right, it might not have come up, but he was less on confidence, right? He's still not confident enough, right? So yeah, confidence is pretty key over here, and understanding the school thoroughly, understanding the employment statistics, and understanding what curriculum they're going to have, what their education style is, really plays a huge role in terms of where you are going to pitch yourself to that school, right? Um, the last one is the personal situation, location, industry, future career trajectory. Another, you know, gonna give another example of an applicant. Applicant was really wanted to get into fashion, right? Wanted to work for L'Oreal in the other companies, and then obviously Paris was one of the biggest choice, and we were really thinking about the schools over there. Apart from that, Milan, you know, was another choice. So your future career trajectory matters a lot. You know, where are you going to gel in, and that is where your personal fit also comes in. You know, which we talked about in the last slide. Industry again, right? So yeah, I think until you know you yourself are prepared that this is where I'm going to go to, I don't think you're going to give your 100%. And to give you to give your 100%, you really need to know the target school completely.
Great. Thanks. All right. Before we move on, there are a bunch of questions, but maybe we'll tackle one or two because they're relevant to what we're discussing right now. But just to wrap up what Tiger and Shantanu just mentioned, you have to have that kind of clarity of vision. Where are you headed? Because an MBA is not the end goal. It is the means to your goal. And it's very important for you to understand where do you see yourself. It could be a geography. It could be a certain region. It could be the weather. It could be you're going to be spending most of your time there. And the easiest for you to find a job is going to be in the vicinity of the school. And let's just accept that fact. That's how schools should be chosen. So there's a question by Alejandro. He says, you mentioned application rounds. There is a myth that only the very best apply for the first rounds, which is why internationals from minorities can do better in second round. Do you agree on that? So Shantanu, Tiger, do you want to take that one up?
Yeah, I can start. And then Shantanu, feel free to give your take. So I'll talk about my experience first, and then give you the AdCom perspective. So I applied in round one for every school, and I applied to 10 plus schools. And so I started about 2 years before, looking at schools, visiting schools, talking to alumni and current students. And I was only going to apply round one. And I think this is entirely a myth, because the very best apply for every round. There's really competitive students every single round, especially for the top schools, right? If you want to like talk on the top 10 schools, the very best applied to all the rounds, and most of them will apply to at least 3 to 5 schools. That's just in my experience of working with really good people. And so round one is going to give you the best chance, because from the AdCom perspective, that's when all the seats are open. They have to fill the class, and they know each round, typically there's some at the margin year to year that is different, but they know how many students they need to get offers to. And remember, like a school like Cornell has about 300 seats. They need to send out much more than 300 seats, because they know the amount of people that come back and say they accept, right? So they need to send out a lot more than 300. At a school like Stanford, with a very low acceptance rate, they can send out less offers, right? Because they have a very good placement rate. When they send out an offer, very few people typically say, I'm not going to go to Stanford. You know, they might go to Harvard if that's an option, right? So you got to understand the school from that perspective in terms of just the statistics. But I think round one is the best. And then on the perspective on internationals, I think Shantanu, you can talk maybe a little bit more about that. But in terms of like underrepresented minorities, especially in the US schools, right? So there's certain programs like Forte or Consortium. So I actually applied through the Consortium round one. And so there's different avenues that you can apply to if you're an underrepresented like minority, at least in the US. And the Consortium has a ton of schools now that you can apply through their system. And so, for example, like under that method, if you apply through the Consortium, there's 2 rounds. And I would definitely apply to round one of the Consortium. Also, typically round 2 has the most applications. So just think about it from the AdCom perspective, right? If I'm the admissions committee, I've got, you know, maybe 3 or 4 people on my team for admissions. And I have hundreds of applications in round 1. I have magnitudes higher in round 2. So just think about it from the perspective of the AdCom, right? I'm reviewing 2, 3, 4x as many applications. So from a human perspective, these are very personalized decisions, right? So I have 3 to 4 times the volume, and I only still have 24 hours in the day, right? So yes, current students help out. Sure, alumni help out depending on the school, but the admissions committee does most of the profile reviews. So it's going to be a very labor-intensive process for them in round 2. That's why I always say round 1, they come in fresh, right? So those are some of my thoughts. Sorry that went out a little bit of length, but very passionate about that topic.
That was very, very helpful. Shantanu, do you want to add, or we're going to take up the questions later towards the end?
Right. I mean, the only thing I have over here is apply as early as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you have very limited time, so like what Tiger said, you can spread your applications across from early action to round 1 to round 2, because it's, of course, like if you're going to apply to 10 schools, it's not possible for you to put in all the effort in round 1. So you have to spread it across, hedge your bets, go for the dream schools for the early rounds, and maybe safer schools in the later rounds. All right, next one.
All right, so 3 steps to craft an admit winning M7 application in 2 to 3 months. So for those applying this year, that's really coming up, right? Because like Harvard, you got less than 3 months left. I think it's September 7th is their round 1. So it's going to be tricky. 2 to 3 months is not a lot of time, but it is more time than 1 to 2 months, right? So and I would say that the steps that you need to craft a winning M7 application is the same for the top 10 and the top 15, right? There's really no shortcuts for really any of the applications. Once you put in the hard work, obviously on your first school, there's a lot that you can leverage for the other. Let's say you want to apply to 5 schools. The other 4 schools are going to be much easier, right? Because you know your stories, you know what you want to tell the schools. The one piece that's a little bit tricky is the sweat equity, right? Because you can only visit so many schools, you can only attend so many virtual events. And to that point, you want to focus the sweat equity on the schools you really want to get into. So the 3 steps are really begin with the end goal in mind, right? So which of the M7s are you focused on? It's going to be really tough for you to do a awesome application 3 months out for all 7 of the M7 schools. Like, let's be honest, right? If you start right now with 3 months left, you're not going to write an amazing application for all 7. So which ones out of the 7 are going to be your focus? So think about prioritization and organization again, right? Again, the second point here is around the sweat equity, right? Like, which of the M7 schools are you differentiated in, right? Like, are you really interested in a specific location? Did you go to a lot of events? Do you know a lot of alumni, a lot of current students at certain specific schools? Those are the ones that you want to spend the most time crafting the essays and your stories to. And then the last point here, right? Set an operating schedule and stick to it. So every week, review and iterate your milestones and what you want to have done. Write down like a daily operating rhythm. What are you going to do? So when I went and applied, so I applied to all my schools round 1. I had 10 plus schools that I applied to. So I basically treated it like work. So I worked during the day, and then I need to spend 2 to 3 hours every single day working on the MBA application. It's basically a job, right? If you want to do it well, you have to consider it a job. It's not just, I'm going to spend a couple hours on the weekend. That's why like a lot of people like working with admissions advisors, right? Because you need that accountability partner. You need somebody that will put you on that rhythm. A lot of applicants don't want to call mom and dad and have them, like, you're already a working professional in most cases, right? Like, you're probably not going to want to ask mom and dad to help you, figure it out. So ask a friend or hire an accountability partner, right? You need somebody to keep you on track, because I've seen a lot of applicants, awesome GPA, awesome GMAT score. They just don't like writing. They dread the essays, right? And so you need somebody that can keep you accountable, because oftentimes I see people have really good stories, but they don't write them very well. And so you need either some help, or you need an accountability partner to keep you on track, to keep you iterating, especially when you only have 2 to 3 months left, right? So those are some things to consider there.
Indeed, well said, Tiger. And guys, I think sweat equity, we've actually discussed a lot about that. There's one point which I thought I missed on earlier, was there are actually a lot of schools. There are actually a few schools, like for example LBS, like London Business School. It specifically asks you how many alums, current students have you spoken to, right? And they would also ask you with who else have you discussed about your decision of going for an MBA, and what have they mentioned. So I also personally feel over here that especially for LBS, right? It's also going to be great that if you could speak, you can bring in, like, you can say that I've actually spoken to my mentor, right? And we feel that we kind of aligned, right, in whatever direction I'm taking from here. So yeah, just missed that point. Thought to bring it up. Yeah. Last point: how to apply for scholarships. Right, that is a sweet topic, right? Everyone over here is looking for scholarships. So guys, last year, our clients received more than 500K just on a scholarship across schools. And I feel pretty. Is someone on not muted?
Yeah, I'm checking. Actually, I can't find. Oh, yes, I could. So yeah, I think it's all good. Go on.
Yeah. Okay. So So guys, so the major difference is automatically getting considered for scholarship versus applying for scholarship, right? There are actually multiple ways through which college a school considers you for the scholarship. One is applying with the application, like for example Oxford and Darren, let's say, they are actually going to ask you to fill up another section in the application form to really mention about how you fit for this particular scholarship, right? Whereas there are a few schools which are going to ask you to apply after you have gotten an admit, right? For instance, like INSEAD, for instance, Stanford, right? Then there are going to be a few schools where you're automatically considered for scholarship, right? Warren, for example, Kellogg, if I'm not mistaken, Fuqua as well, right? A bunch of schools over there, right? So you, whatever schools you're actually applying to, I'm not just keeping it I'm not just narrowing it down to M7, keeping it open across. So whatever schools you are applying to, we gotta check that, right? And also in scholarship, there are infinite different scholarships that are available. Forte, merit-based, minority from this particular community, right? So there are actually a bunch of things which are available over there. And if you are from LGBTQ community, there's Romba. There's actually a bunch of stuff available over there. So it would be great that whatever schools you pick up, go in there, go to school's website, just scroll through the entire website for scholarships and try to see where do you fit in, which scholarship you should apply to, right? And then there's one point, generally what people feel is that I've already spoken about my story, my narrative in the essays. Now what should I write in the scholarship essay, right? Because it's perfectly fine. You can repeat it. Perfectly fine. We have gotten all the scholarship which you're seeing over here, the basis of that. So don't worry about it. Scholarship essay is one thing where you can repeat your entire narrative, right? Now, in interest of time, I'm going to quickly, cover up the next 2 points. Establishing uniqueness among the admits here is the biggest point, because when you're getting an admit, you got to establish uniqueness, with respect to all the applicants. Now, whoever has gotten an admit, now you got to establish uniqueness over there, right? So when you're writing scholarship, now you don't just have to think from the perspective of there's an average person who's going to apply over there, so I think this is going to go through. No, scholarship needs to be bang on target, better than your the application that you're putting up to get an admit. Last point, haggling, yes or no? It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Talk about European schools, a lot of applicants last year, they got through both INSEAD and LBS, and INSEAD comes up earlier and LBS comes later, right? And then they could haggle scholarship with LBS, right? Whereas if they come to US business schools, right? We had an applicant got through like bunch of schools, right? Had really got like huge scholarship, like 60K, 70K. But when it came to Columbia was like, no, whatever we've offered to you, that's it. We're not going to haggle over here. So again, depends on school to school, but you should haggle. I mean, you have nothing to lose, right? If it turns out in your favor, then well and good. If it doesn't, fine. You already have, something in your kitty. Right. Then that's it, right, Paridhi? Over to you.
All right. Thank you, both of you. Very insightful. We have a couple of questions. I'll tackle one of them for now before I jump onto the process, because I feel it's relevant right now. So Sandeep is asking, I took a GMAT recently, got a score of 680. I'm sure I can do better. And if I dedicate a couple of more weeks, of course you can and you will. But I'm afraid I will not have enough time to work on my application. Background, 4 years of work experience, tech lead role, planning to apply in R1. Any suggestions? All right, so let me tackle this, and then maybe Tiger and Shantanu can build upon that a little. First of all, I always tell all the applicants that I ever speak to, please don't look at GMAT, GRE, and your application in sequence. It's not in sequence. That's it. It has to go hand in hand. It's like a part of the journey. You can't say that I have to tackle one thing first and only then I'm going to start working on the next. And I think we have established that in this whole session that we've been talking about. That's all where the sweat equity is going to go. You need to start exploring. You need to know your goals. You need to have that clarity. You need to work on your application alongside with a 680 and keep on working on your GMAT. We work with a lot of applicants like yourself. People take GMAT, GRE multiple times, but they don't compromise on their application while they're doing it. So that's my 2 cents on it. Maybe Tiger, Shantanu, you want to build up on that a little?
Yeah, I'll just say that. Go ahead, Shantanu.
Go ahead, Tiger. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tiger.
Yeah, I'll just say that really like Parity's point around you have to do all of these things at the same time, right? That's why I was talking about you have to treat this like a job. I spend 3 to 4 hours every day on this stuff. And the reason why you have to do all these things at the same time is because of the things that are longer duration out of your control. So the letters of rec, right? You have to reach out. You can't do my GMAT, do the essays, and then you got 1 month left for reaching out to like recommenders. You have to start things that are out of your control really early. The sweat equity piece is really tough, right? Because you can't just have 1 month left and say, I'm going to reach out to a bunch of current students and alumni, because typically those are very busy people. And the earlier that you start, you can start scheduling some calls with them, right? So those are some things to consider there. And then I'll pass it over to Shantanu.
Right. Totally agree with both of with both the points, Tiger and Paradi, you guys made. I feel that GMAT GRE is important. That constitutes, I think, 15% of your entire application. The test score is never a selection criteria. Yes, it can be an elimination criteria for sure, right? But it doesn't mean that if you have a 780 or 800 or probably a 334 or 335 in GRE, you just straight away getting through. No, you're not. So from that perspective, I strongly feel that obviously, you actually need to. I think now is the time. I mean, had you asked me this question like 4 months ago or like 5 months ago, I would have said like, you have time to focus on your GMAT. But I guess by now, if you really want to focus on round one, I think the things need to go hand in hand. Depends, from time to time.
Yeah. So there were a lot of questions around this. I hope we've answered all your questions. We'll be tackling more questions in a bit, but before that, first of all, if you're looking to work with MBA and beyond, and there are so many of you, and some of you we've already spoken to, and we are in talks. So there's a little process for it. We work with limited number of applicants in a cycle, each cycle. And we really want to get to know you first before we jump onto deciding that we're going to be successful together or not. That's why we do a lot of profile evaluations. We dig deep. We talk to consultants amongst ourselves within the team to assess your situation and chances, because the idea is to get you to be successful in the schools that you're trying to attempt. Now, I would like to talk about the process that we follow, because this is also a very lengthy and a comprehensive process, and we just don't start working on your essays immediately. We take you through a little pre-work that we do with all our applicants before we jump onto your essays or even figuring out what schools should you apply to. This phase is called content gathering phase. You can call it like an introspection phase or a reflection phase. Some of you are already aware of it, but for the others who don't know, so I'm going to talk about it. Content gathering phase is going to have 3 sets. Set 1 revolves around very high level questions around core and fundamentals of any business school, no matter what business school you're applying to. So we've defined some frameworks that help you answer any question that may come across from any business schools, and they've been broken down into 12 main questions and 40 sub questions. These questions will help you lay out the pieces of your story together. You just have to brain dump yourself. They are made really very easy for you. You're going to be answering questions around why MBA? Why should you be putting this kind of money into an MBA? Why not do something else or start a business of your own? Because it's a lot of money that you're going to be putting in. What is the vision of your life? How do you position yourself as a global business leader? What are these aspects or real world challenges that you really care about? What should you be solving passionately? Where can you have evidences of passion that can help you write a convincing story for an AdCom. Once you answer them, you will realize that these are more like pieces of puzzles spread across, which you can later use and build your application on it for any damn school. Now, this is set one, but this is your thought process in one dimension coming from within you yourself. You are not looking at yourself from the other person perspective. That's why we have set two. Set two is a space where we get to know you as a person from a third person perspective. And if we at MBA and Beyond have to do justice to your application as a facilitator, we need to understand you from all angles. So we ask you to choose 3 really important people in your life, one personal, one professional connection, and the third one could be either of them. We send them a very candid questionnaire, collect some information on your personality, on your experiences with them, on your strengths, weaknesses, how do they see your achievements, etc. And then we, of course, put them all together and bring another perspective to your application to remove any self-biases that you may have in your application. It's very likely that you may oversell or undersell yourself in an application. And it's important to understand your own self from other people's perspective. Some people are very clever that they end up getting their recommenders to do this bit for them. So they already know what their recommenders are going to be talking about in the recommendation, and they can build their evidences and stories in the direction to pitch it to a top business school. Because always remember, a recommendation is a complementary piece of evidence that is going to make your case stronger in front of the admissions committee. So if you're talking about leadership in your essay, 2 evidences coming from your recommender on leadership, your case is already made for a top business school application. That's set 2. Then we move on to set 3. This is a space where I feel it really helps overrepresented candidates stand out, because we focus a lot on personality. Overrepresented candidates, they have more or less same professional journeys, doing the same kind of job. You might have moved a KPI from point A to point B. Another one could have moved it from point A to point C. How do you stand out? Like, there's no way if you just stick to your professional journeys. It's important to bring out your personalities in your application, because that's what's going to match you to the values of different business schools. Here, we're going to put you through a personality test. And based on the results of the test, we're going to define the traits that are going to make up the backbone of your application. And everything else that you've done in your life is going to hang around it as a supporting piece of evidence. This journey of content gathering phase you take with a content gathering specialist, who's also a psychology specialist, gives you a safe environment to be the person that you really are. And we really request you to be as honest as possible in this journey. Talk about your personal experiences, professional experiences, any challenges that you might have faced, but just dump them there, because you never know what aspect of your life might just click to the admissions committee. That's consultant's role to decide. You just dump yourself there. That's when, once you've done all the content gathering, that's when your consultant's job comes into play. Your consultant is an alum of a top business school, most likely top 10. And they are here just to raise the intellectual average of any business school. So they are here to give back to the community. Some of them are startup founders sitting in the Silicon Valley. Some of them are working with MBBs. They work with limited number of applicants, but they make sure that they give unlimited hours to those applicants. So these consultants are going to go through your content, go into a brainstorming session with you, and the consultant is going to prepare a branding document for you, which is going to have your high-level storyline, your theme, your strategy, and your direction. Once you have that in place, if you're struggling with picking the right schools that you should apply to, this is the moment to have a discussion with your consultant, because by now you'll have enough clarity about your journey, about your goals, what you want to get out of an MBA, and it'll be much more easier for you to pick a business school at this stage. You can spend good 15 to 20 days just content gathering, arriving at your branding document, and then picking the schools that you should apply to, where you have the highest potential of converting. Once you pick these schools, the regular process starts. This is when we start working on your essays. The consultant is going to help you give the whole direction and the placement of the content that you already have. It's just a game of plug and play now, because most of the content gathering has already been done. In 3 to 4 iterations, mostly we've seen that the essays become stellar. We also help you with letter of recommendation. I'll tell you how. Of course, we don't write it for you, but we help you dig into the major points that your recommenders should be talking about that are very well aligned with the essay pointers that you're making to make your case stronger. This is something that we call LOR mapping. So your consultant does LOR mapping based on your story to pick the points that your recommenders necessarily need to talk about in the recommendation. You'll have a session with us on your resume, video interviews, and finally, if you make it through the final round, then we're going to, of course, do a lot of mock sessions with you to make sure that you make it through to the school that you're like wanting to get into. So that's the full process. It's very comprehensive. And if you're interested in working with us, and if you could imbibe a lot of insights from this session, we really want you to answer these 2 questions. Taru from our team is going to be reaching out to you. And we're going to be selecting top 3 candidates who we are going to be offering generous discounts, depending on the number of schools that they're going for. But the discount is going to be up to 20%. The first question that you have to tackle is, what do you think sets you apart from your peers? Some of you are very interesting candidates sitting over here, and I've talked to you and I kind of know that it's but just take a shot at this, try to put it all together, because telling a story verbally is one thing and putting it together in words is another thing. And we really have to see, how did you do that? So think about how will you make your story memorable to a top business school. Go back to the slide that Tiger was talking about. How do you make yourself more memorable? Think about it, write it down. Doesn't have a word limit. Go as long as you want to. We are all willing to read your answers here. Second question you have to answer is, which schools do you want to apply to and why? There is no right or wrong answer. We just want to see what is your approach of picking a certain school versus the others. Mention at least 3 schools and your reasons for choosing those schools. So if you are interested in working with us, send it to us by end of day tomorrow, whichever time zone you're in. Like any time zone, end of day is acceptable. And we're going to come back to you in a day or 2 after going through all your answers. We have a couple of questions. I know we're running out of time, so we're going to be tackling them one by one. Thanks for jumping back in, Shantanu. All right, there's this question. I have a gap of 2 years in my education. How should I present my case for M7 schools considering the competition? Shantanu, Tiger, do you want to take this one up? It's a tricky one. Gap of 2 years in education and wants to apply to M7 schools. So how should he address it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a tough nut to crack, first of all. I would say that. And I would say would be great if we can, touch on a personal level, right? There are ways, and even in the past we have helped, right? There are actually multiple ways through which this can be tackled, and I think the best thing is to get in touch for this one.
Yeah, I'll build up on that. Just an example. So there was an applicant who had a 2-year gap, but of course there were some personal reasons. So a lot of things depend on what was the reason for those gaps, and is there a way to address them? If there are ways, then definitely we can. So like Shantanu said, go ahead, schedule a call with us, profile evaluation call. We'll evaluate what situation has been, have a conversation internally within the team to see if this can be tackled for M7 specifically. All right, there's another question.
I actually saw a question over here, guys. First of all, extremely sorry, can't answer all the question, but I saw a question over here. Space, have you worked with someone, with like space related stuff? Yes, we have. We work with a very interesting applicant who. You guys would be aware of this Mars rover Perseverance, right? Which landed on Mars, I think, last year or year before that, and then the rover had a small helicopter, which goes around, right? So over there on Mars, you don't have these 5G or 4G towers, right, through which you can communicate, right? So the communication channel is a channel which the applicant worked on, and yeah, it was a pretty interesting story. So yes, we have to answer that. Yes.
All right.
But there are a lot of questions, but we are out of time. But over to you, Pardeep.
Maybe we tackle just one more, and after that, I mean, some of us, just one more, last one. Sorry, guys, but feel free to reach out to us on email. We are happy to answer your questions. There's a team sitting over there. We'll tackle them. So this question says, how can, maybe not this one, yeah. How can international candidates shortlist schools on the basis of recruiters who I hire for sponsored positions? My question is specifically for finance or fintech companies.
Tiger, do you want to jump in, or should I take it?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources around target companies and if they sponsor. That's a little bit more of a tactical thing in terms of which companies would be most like cohesive to your future career goals. I think, again, from the application standpoint, it goes with the sweat equity again, right? Like knowing which companies you want to target is sometimes really helpful when you craft your essays, because it makes it a lot more direct and specific. And oftentimes there's some schools, I'll just give you the example of Cornell. Our school is sponsored or named after SC Johnson, which is a company over in Wisconsin, Racine. And there's a number of events that that company holds for us that are very specialized, right? And so when you think around the short list of the companies that you're interested in that meet that criteria, then look at the schools and also look at the alumni, right? I think the alumni are really helpful. You know, I interned at Amazon during the summer in between my first and second year of the MBA, and I had a intern mate that was there at the same time. She went to Wharton, and she actually was from Vietnam, and she actually had a list of all the schools, all the companies that she targeted. She went through a very meticulous process. This was when she was in her first year of the MBA, but those lists are available. It just takes some work to kind of whittle down exactly what you need. And it seems like you're pretty specific around fintech, so you can kind of shortlist that list pretty quickly.
All right, thanks a lot. Thank you. And I'm sorry if you're overshooting, and Shantanu and Tiger also have to jump out. So guys, please feel free to send your questions. Some of you asked for packages. We are going to drop the link below. One thing I'd like to announce that since this is the Pride Month, we're doing something very special on 25th of May for Pride Community. We do it every year. And feel free to join us there. We are going to be announcing that. You will find it on the website. We'll probably reach out to you on an email. If you're a part of the community or if you're an ally, there's a huge opportunity with MBA and Beyond and B schools if you want to work with us. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Tiger, and thanks, Shantanu, for a very insightful session. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone.